All right, so welcome everyone. Today's webinar is really part of the overall topic on leadership and emotional intelligence. A lot of people call this soft skills or social skills, so that it goes by different names, but it has a wide variety and a lot of value to not only leaders, but people who work in teams and who work with other individuals. Today's particular topic is about influence and decision making. And the idea here is I will present a couple of different models that might be helpful to clarify some of these topics for you. So let's imagine a couple of different scenarios, right? So you could have an emergency situation that just arose needing your immediate attention. You could have perhaps the need or the desire to take your group out for a thank you lunch. Or your group perhaps needs to find the root cause of a recurring problem. So you see these three scenarios are very, very different. They have different elements to them, different elements of urgency and need to do certain levels of communication. So how do you deal with this type of information? So how these decisions should be made, when we say how, what we actually mean is who are the people that should be involved in this decision? That's probably one of the first questions you should be asking when you're dealing with this type of decision-making scenario. So in other words, what we mean by this in today's session is, should it be the boss who makes this decision, the supervisor, the manager, whatever the case may be? Should it be the group that takes the decision, or is it some kind of combination of the two? Like most things in life, there is no one perfect answer. It really depends on a couple of things, right? So you need to think about, for instance, elements such as the urgency and the importance of the situation. Urgency really means the speed that the decision needs to be made versus importance, how critical is it, okay? Another question to ask yourself is, who knows the answer? Is this something that's generally known by everyone? Or is there only one or two individuals that actually knows the answer for this problem or issue? And another important question is, do you need collaboration in this scenario? Some cases you do want it, some cases you probably don't want it. So let's have a look at some of these concepts in a little bit more detail. So here's a model that I really like. I've been using it for quite a bit of years. And it's relatively easy to follow. As you see, it has only two elements. There's the percent decision made by the boss and percent decision made by the team. And each one has a different name to it in a different type of scenario. We're going to look at each one at a time so that you can better understand what it's all about. So the first one, the model is called given. As you can see from the bottom right in the arrow, it means 100% of the decision is made by the boss, while the team actually has no say in the decision. So what that means is the boss or the manager or the supervisor makes completely the full decision of this situation and gives the instruction to the employees. So this works really, really well when you have, for example, urgent situations where the action is very clear. You don't really have the time to debate different viewpoints. And it also works really well if the boss or the manager knows the answer in this case, right? One of the cautions and pitfalls that you have to be careful in using this model, of course, if you overuse it, okay, your team may stop thinking. It's the famous situation where your team starts shutting off their brain because they go, well, you know, the boss is always making every single decision of every single day of the week and of the month. So we start over-relying on that relationship and you start disengaging perhaps your team members. So that's one thing to be careful of when using this model. The second one is called advice. So it starts shifting a little bit. It's still primarily the boss. As you can see in the bottom right, the boss is making 75% of the decision and the team is supplying 25% of the rest of the decision. So what does that mean? That means the manager still wants to retain the decision, but is looking for input, is looking for advice from the team members. So it works really well. You could use it in urgent situations when you have a little bit of luxury of time, the need to collect various viewpoints. You know, you have a really, really good idea what you want to do, but you're looking for some some specific detail or some specific comments from your team to make sure it's a well-rounded decision. Okay, so you're looking for that input from your team members, for example, just to make sure nothing was missed. The cautions and pitfalls in this scenario is if you're receiving input from the team, if you're not doing that in a genuine fashion, you can result in a very frustrated group. So in other words, we don't want, if you're in this scenario as a boss or a manager, don't fake it. If you're truly in this page or in this model, it means you truly want people's input. You don't have to take everybody's comments, of course, but it has to be genuine. It has to be a very genuine exercise of collecting and asking for advice. Then we get to the middle of this model, which is called negotiate. So you're basically 50-50 in terms of the decision-making split. So the manager, in this example, the boss, wishes to open this discussion or this decision equally amongst everyone. Okay, works really, really well. For example, important situations that would really benefit from having everyone's viewpoint. Okay, and where you actually want consensus. Consensus for you in this situation is an important part of getting buy-in to the solution, because it's really an equal split, an equal weighting of boss to employee. Cautions and pitfalls. I'm sure most of you have been in this situation before. Consensus can take a long time and can yield sometimes wrong decisions. So you have to be very cognizant that this could happen, and you have to have the ability to navigate through this, especially the time one. The idea of consensus sometimes could go back and forth quite a bit, and it might push you to leave this model into a different model. Okay, as we keep progressing to the right, now we're getting more in terms of the decisions being made by the team members. So this one is called the consulting model. We have the team taking 75% of the decisions and the boss retaining only 25%. In this case, the manager, the boss, the supervisor is comfortable delegating decision to the employees, but still wants to be consulted during the process and or with the final decision. So I'm very comfortable having the team going through this and navigating through the issues and coming up with a decision, but I'm being consulted. They're coming to me and just making sure that we're on the right track. So it works really well if the employees are capable to generate the decision, but they may require, for example, a final approval by the boss. So that could be one situation, or just some comments during the journey of making the decision where you want the boss to provide some of those comments. Cautions and pitfalls. This one's a bit tricky, especially depending on the style of the supervisor or the boss. Confusion can occur if the boss starts slipping from this role, the role of a consultant, to decision maker, right? So then all of a sudden, the team members start saying, well, I thought we were making the decision, but obviously the boss or the manager is trying to pull the decision back to him or herself, okay? So you have to be really careful. If you want to be in this world of the manager being only 25% of the decision, you have to be genuine that that's the case. And the last one in this model is 100% team and 0% boss, okay? So this is where the team owns the decision, hence the name of the model here. The manager in this case has to be very, very comfortable with whatever decision is taken by the group, okay? So that's the whole idea of the model. You're not even being consulted. You're saying, I'm leaving this completely in your hands. I've given you enough information, enough constraints, and I'm willing to accept whatever you come up with. So it works really well. Situation can benefit from having the entire process and decision owned by the employees. When you need to encourage empowerment and growth, that's really, really good, right? If you have a team, you want to have some scenarios and some situations where you allow the team members to grow. And one of the best ways to do it is by using this particular split. You're saying, it may not be a critical decision, but I'm leaving it entirely up to you, and I trust your judgment. It's also a good way as a boss to demonstrate that you're not micromanaging every single decision. So by having a few decisions in this world, you're demonstrating that to your team. Cautions and pitfalls, very similar to the one that I mentioned in the previous slide. The boss cannot override the final decision. Okay. If you start doing that even just once or twice, you will totally deflate your team. Okay. Here you are, you're very excited. You're going through the whole scenarios of coming up with the situation and the decision. You get to the finish line, you have your decision, and the boss comes in and overrides your decision, which makes it a very, very deflating exercise. So a summary of this is there is no one perfect method to make or set up decisions. Okay, I'm sure you're all figuring this out as you're going through the slides, but there's a couple of suggestions, a couple of musts, if you wish. You need to understand which split between boss and team best fits the particular situation. So some of those questions about urgency, importance, criticality, these type of things, understand where you need to be. And communicate to each other the expectation of how the decision will be made. Okay. A lot of people ask, does that mean we really have to say what the split is beforehand? I mean, when you're first using the tool, I've done that myself, where I articulate and actually communicate this is going to be a 75-25% decision, so people know what is expected, and there's no there's lower frustration at the end of the exercise. In terms of what the secret is, I think you see where I'm going with this slide. You really need, if you're the manager in the situation, of course, you need to be transparent and aware of which decision model you are picking. That's really what the key is, because there is no, there's no one magic solution, one size fits all type of scenario. So if you're very clear with the communication and you're very transparent of how you're trying to make a decision, then it will work. People will tend to respect whether it's 0, 100 or 100, 0. If you're clear, if you communicate and you're very honest about it, it rarely has any problems. So there's a scenario I often use about ordering lunch or coming up with a lunch. And same idea, right? It should be something in the spirit of, for example, this one. I should be able to say, well, the team is coming up with a lunch idea. I'm leaving it all for them. The team gets together. They're really excited about going out for lunch. They come up with an idea of going, to Chinese. And then the boss comes in and goes, well, I had Chinese yesterday, so instead we're going to go for pizza. So you can imagine the frustration that you would get in a team environment when something like this happens. It takes the whole joy and the whole spirit of having made this decision completely out of the group. Okay, I have one more thing to show just to wrap up this topic, and that is one tool. It's a support tool to aid with decisions. So if you have something that's a little bit more, not necessarily complex per se, but you have a certain decision that it might have a little bit of repercussions, or you're worried about what the consequences could be of having taken the specific decision. This is an influence idea grid is one of the names of this tool. Some people call it a stakeholder analysis grid. It comes by different names. You see 3 columns. One is project issues or concerns. So that is, what are some of the concerns associated with that specific decision or situation, I should say. And then you have a middle column, which often gets missed or ignored when people do this activity, which is, what are some of the personal needs? What are some of the value drivers? And I'll show you an example of what I mean by this. What's important to the people that are being affected by this decision? And then now you're getting to the action part. So the action plan, what is your action plan? And what are some of your ideas in order to influence the various stakeholders? Okay, so what actions should be taken in light of that first and that second column? So let's look at a very simple example. Simple example is, perhaps there is something happening in the company. There is a decision that potentially will generate a lot more overtime. So we're having some issues, we're falling behind on some orders, and therefore, it seems like we're going to have a lot of overtime over the next couple of months, for instance, in order to catch up with the orders. So that is the concern. In that second column, now we say, well, how do the workers feel? What is my knowledge of the workers in terms of overtime? So my first knowledge is, yeah, they're interested in the money. I think they'll be very happy getting the extra cash with the overtime. But I remember we did a survey in this scenario where people also wanted a better work-life balance. So they didn't want to, really, really go crazy in terms of being at work. They wanted some family time, some alone time, some personal time. So I go in with that knowledge. I know that I have a situation that requires more overtime, and I also know that the workers are okay with having more money, but also looking for a balanced approach. So in this very simple example, you could make a sort of an action plan, if you want to call it, that says, right, so the first wave, the first element of my action plan is my burning platform. My urgency is to explain to the workers that, look, we're having some issues. We're falling behind with the sales or with the deliveries. We really need to help out the company. We need to catch up in the short term by pulling together, and there will be a lot more overtime available for all of you, okay? But because you are armed with the fact that you know that people are also looking with balance, you could have a second wave, a second level of communication that says, in exchange, we're going to make sure that this short-term vision of squeezing and pushing and working together and working overtime will only last a couple of months, and then we're going to not only revert back to normal, but we're going to start giving a little bit of time off, extra time off, for instance, in whatever way you want to define it. So this is a way of capturing those two columns in a very simple action plan. And then you see there's a bullet there at the bottom right of the table. A lot of times these type of tools are what are linked with change management approaches, right? So when you're dealing with change management, it goes hand in hand with decision making. You're trying to understand, based on the things I need to do, based on the decisions I'm taking, what is the best way of doing it so that I'm having a very happy and satisfied, not just workforce. When we say stakeholders, it could also be other people as well. It could be a client base, for instance. Okay. So that's, I just wanted to end this webinar with one tool to support the idea of taking proper decision making and influencing as well. So in summary, the whole idea of leadership and emotional intelligence, remember that topic about social skills or soft skills, they're very much all the non-technical skills. There are a lot of those type of skills and attributes that every person really should be familiar with. And I would say not just as a leader, but as a team member. The more you arm yourself with a lot of the tools that are involved with leadership and emotional intelligence, the stronger you will be and the better career you will have as well. Influence in decision making helps to better understand how to generate and deliver decisions, including who owns them. So remember, if you're trying this model out, the idea of better decision making is also trying to understand who should own that. Should it be owned by a manager, for instance? Should it be owned by the working team? Or is there some kind of hybrid we want to use for that particular situation? And as I mentioned, it's very much linked to change management and overall management of projects and tasks. Okay. So I want to thank you for your time. I will launch a very, very quick poll question. I would appreciate if you can answer. And I am available and open for any questions you may have on the topic. And you could you can ask your question verbally, just put your mic on, or you can write it into the chat window.
Hey, I don't have a question, but just something to add.
Go ahead.
This also fits with the type of approach you want to take with your team too, as a leader. Like for example, if no one knows the answer, like you mentioned, the boss already knows the answer. If no one knows the answer, the boss basically becomes a team as well. So the last one, which is where the team takes the decision without the leader's decision, becomes like they own it together. And then the negotiate one also becomes where, okay, the boss knows the answer, but he wants the team to also, like we do in Kaizen events.
Yeah, no, it's a
win-win.
Yeah, it's a great point, Abdel, and I kind of mentioned a little bit in passing, but I'm glad you brought it up. It can happen that it'll move from one model to the next, but you have to, obviously, like we mentioned, we have to be careful that we don't do it sort of in a bad way where people get frustrated. But it can happen where there's an assumption that one person, sort of the boss, should know it, but actually there's maybe that's incorrect, right? And the model could change where usually moving to the right of this model, the only danger there is perhaps not the right decisions being made, but usually the frustration happens when you go from right to left, right? If you start on the right, anywhere on the right, and sort of without really noticing it, the boss is starting to pull it to the left, that's where frustration happens. But if it happens very openly and honestly, like you were saying in a Kaizen event, then that's perfect.
Yeah, it can happen from right to left if you hire someone new and it doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, it's more of a, it's sometimes it's a lack of experience, right? You want to, you're a supervisor and you want to show that you're a team player and you're letting the decision being made by someone else, but within a few minutes you're pulling it back, right? You're also, why did you ask my opinion if you're not actually going to listen to it, right? So there's some of that, and that's what this is all about. That's why it's very much linked to change management, because if you get this wrong, people always think of change management for projects. But even within your group, right, even within your little team, if you get change management wrong, you can have a very bad chemistry, right, in terms of how the team works together. Yeah, good point, Abdel. Thanks.
Yeah, and I like the last one there with the stakeholder matrix. And, pretty cool.
Yeah, there's other tools, and we may show them in future webinars. But this is a very simple one. It's almost a lot of these. What I call simple tools, they're really good just to clear up the thought, clear up your brain. Sometimes you could have a very complex situation. You really don't know where to start. But this one here is very simple. It only has 3 columns, and you're able to kind of see, well, am I making a mistake here? Should my action in the example I gave you, should the action have a couple of different elements instead of just one based on what I know of the people? Right? Yep. Thanks, Abdel.
Well, hey, Carmen, a quick question. Does level of maturity, I guess level of maturity would determine which model you'd follow in terms of own, negotiates, and X, Y, and Z. But is there a circumstance where you believe to have the learning, you believe to have the knowledge, and you would want to go in with, say, a consult model, but it's taking too long? Is it?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That you start getting that itch that says,
That's right. That's right. Well, I think you hit all the
go ahead.
you hit all the right topics, right? So when you're in for instance, this is a good example. You're new in your role, right? Whatever your role is, doesn't matter what industry. You may feel a little awkward being in the first one where you own 100% of the decision, because you're a new boss, you're a new manager, you're not really sure you understand the whole intricacies of the department or of the company. So don't take the first one. You maybe start with the second one, right? Start with where you're comfortable making maybe 50 to 75% of the decision, right? So that's definitely maturity is a big part of it, because if you're not comfortable with your new role, and you're not comfortable, maybe you're new in your career as well, being on the left-hand side is kind of tricky, right? Until you feel very strong about it. The second thing you mentioned, definitely anything about negotiation and consensus could spiral out of control, right? So I think this goes back to Abdel's point that, sometimes you may have to pull the trigger a little bit and say, well, we were trying to get consensus. We really wanted everybody's opinion. We wanted to have a voting system. And there are other tools to do that. There's ways where you have almost like a voting system with points, and it helps speed it up, because at the end you just add up the points. You go, well, that's it. That's the sort of the average response of the group, and it cuts it in the right spot. Otherwise, the discussions can take on forever and forever. So you're right, Shafi, on that one. Does that make sense, Shafi?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, I want to thank everyone for their time today, and hope to see you again next week, same time, same place. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.